Hi folks, welcome back to 3 Minute Tales. This is the Shebeen and I'm your storyteller Shanna Key. Now for any young child to lose both parents you would imagine would be traumatic enough, but to then find yourself being put into the care of one of the most notorious reform schools in the country, that's the stuff of nightmares. And that's exactly what happened to the little boy that I'm going to tell you about today. It really is a sad one. I might as well tell you from the outset, but it has to be told. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to leave a comment, you can do so down below. And as I keep saying, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, please hit it and the little notification bell, because it means that every time we upload, you're going to be notified. So until the next time, thanks so much for your time. I'm Shanna Key. "1949 was a terrible year for the O'Neill family. In January, 40-year-old Tom O'Neill, the father of 5 children, was tragically killed after being knocked down on his way to work at a factory in Ringsend in Dublin. 4 months later, his wife Margaret died suddenly of a brain hemorrhage, leaving her 5 young children orphans. The eldest of the O'Neill children, Eamon, was just 11 years old, and the youngest, a daughter, had just turned 2 when their mother sadly passed away. 4 of the 5 children were eventually taken into care by various family members, but sadly Eamon had to be placed into the care of St. Joseph's Industrial School in Artane. From the moment Eamon set foot inside the boys' home, his life was to be changed forever. After growing up in a small inner city flat with loving parents and siblings, his new surroundings were the polar opposite to his happy home life. The interior of the industrial school was more like that of a wartime concentration camp than a safe haven for an 11-year-old orphan. The reformatory was run by the state, but overseen and operated by Christian brothers who had little or no training in the welfare of children. The 420 boys in their care were detained at the school for various reasons, such as parental neglect, truancy, destitution, and for committing minor petty crime. On the first day at St. Joseph's, Eamon was brought to a senior Christian brother's office for enrolment, but after taking an instant dislike to the quietly spoken 11-year-old, the 40-year-old sadistic bully made fun of the child before setting upon him, beating him black and blue with a leather belt. This was the first of almost daily beatings at the hands of various brothers. The regime inside the walls of the industrial school was one of terror, abuse and neglect for the boys, with almost no child in their care escaping the evil wrath of their violent carers. Ironically, the children actually received very little schooling while at St. Joseph's, with the brothers opting to utilise the children in other ways. Some of the boys worked on the farm, growing and cultivating fruit and vegetables, while other boys worked in the knitting room, the kitchen, or cleaning and maintaining the grounds of the school. There were 3 large dormitories where up to 150 boys slept every night. Each night, without fail, random boys were dragged from their beds by various Christian brothers and brought to other parts of the school to be brutally beaten or violated. Their victims were chosen indiscriminately, but those who were more frequently abused were usually quiet, timid children. The abuse that the children at St. Joseph's were subjected to was unspeakable. Very often, children would end up in the infirmary from injuries received at the hands of the violent thugs who were employed to look after them. One particular teacher, Brother Joe, was particularly brutal. The burly 35-year-old Tipperary man had an unquenchable thirst for violence. His sadistic nature saw him even encouraging older boys to savagely beat younger children with sticks in order to avoid a beating themselves. He got a twisted kick out of having such control over the young boys, and was the personification of evil, universally feared and hated by each and every boy in the school. In early June 1950, while Eamon was working in one of the fields inside the confines of the school, he made the rash and soon-to-be regretted decision to climb the high wall and make his escape. Using a wooden stepladder, he clambered over the wall and ran aimlessly away. When his absence was noted, the brothers notified the police, who quickly found and returned young Eamon to St. Joseph's after locating him a short distance from the school. When he was returned, Brother Joe thanked the police and took a terrified Eamon into his office. Inside, he beat, punched and kicked the young 12-year-old unconscious, leaving Eamon to spend over a week in the infirmary. His injuries included a broken wrist, fractured ribs, a broken nose, 2 black eyes and 4 missing teeth that had been knocked out by the sadistic thug. Usually when boys were admitted to the infirmary with physical injuries, a report almost always listed their injuries as a result of a fall. On Eamon's medical report sheet on this particular occasion, it stated that he had fallen from an apple tree after attempting to steal fruit for himself and another boy. If Brother Joe took a dislike to a child, he would refuse to call them by their name. Instead, he would refer to them by their registered detainee number. In Eamon's case, he was referred to as boy number 462. Whenever he heard Brother Joe bellow the number, he knew instantly that he was soon to be on the end of a vicious beating. The abuse was relentless, with Christmas Day the only day in the calendar that the boys could be sure that they would not be beaten. This temporary relief from abuse was like a sick and twisted Christmas gift to the children from their persecutors. By the time he was eventually released from St. Joseph's in 1954, 16-year-old Eamon had been kicked, beaten, raped and humiliated hundreds of times at the hands of at least 6 different Christian brothers. During his 5 years detention, he had received not one single visit from any family member, so understandably Eamon took this personally. It had a devastating effect on his emotional and mental health. Now finding himself homeless, he stole food from Dublin grocery stores and slept rough in the dark alleyways of the city. After living rough for almost 4 months, he signed up as a merchant Navy seaman upon a British cargo ship, the Endeavour, working as a kitchen porter. Eamon spent the next 6 years circumnavigating the globe on a variety of ships, before eventually settling permanently in Sydney, Australia, finding work in the kitchen of a city centre hotel. He quickly became friends with a young Australian kitchen hand called Kevin Smith. Kevin had also been raised in a boys' home after his alcoholic parents could no longer look after him. Kevin was a keen boxer and soon introduced Eamon to the sport. Eamon, who was a naturally athletic and powerfully built young man, took to boxing like a duck to water. Within 4 short years of first putting on a pair of boxing gloves, he fought in the New South Wales State Amateur Boxing Championships. He was both revered and respected by his peers for the first time in his life, and the members of his local boxing club had a plaque placed on the wall to celebrate his achievements. His success inside the ring was mirrored outside it too. The catering company that he had set up with his longtime friend Kevin saw profits soar as the business flourished throughout Sydney. In November 1969, a full 15 years after being released from Artane's industrial school, Eamon, along with his wife Rosie, made the long trip back to Ireland for a 3-week-long holiday. Eamon promised himself not to go anywhere close to where he had been detained and abused for 5 long years. The memories were still too raw. Instead, he decided to spend most of his holiday exploring the rest of the countryside that he had never visited as a young boy. On the second last day of the trip, the couple visited Dublin city before their long-haul 5-stop flight home the next day. Late in the afternoon, they entered the landmark Bewley's Cafe on Dublin's Grafton Street for a bite to eat. Eamon and Rosie took their seats at a table and ordered sandwiches and a pot of tea from the young waitress. As the couple chatted, the figure of a man sitting next to a blazing open fire in the far corner of the cafe caught Eamon's eye. He scrutinised the man's face intently, who was engrossed in a book and totally oblivious to Eamon's stares. Immediately, Eamon recognised the man as Brother Joe. He was older now and fatter, but there was no doubt in his mind that it was him. When the young waitress came back to their table with their food, Eamon asked her if she had any idea who the man who was sitting by the fire was. She turned to see who Eamon was referring to, before nodding. "That's Brother Joe. He comes in here most days," she confirmed. Eamon and his wife were just about finished their food when Brother Joe stood up and walked towards the gents' toilets. Eamon wiped his mouth with a paper napkin before standing up. "I'm just nipping into the toilet," said Eamon, leaving Rosie seated at the table. When inside the toilets, Eamon approached Joe, who was drying his hands with some paper towel. Joe turned and looked at Eamon, who was standing no more than 2 foot away from him. "Are you Brother Joe Coyle by any chance?" asked Eamon. The Christian brother gazed at Eamon quizzically. "I hope you're enjoying the heat from that fire out there, because where you're going is going to be a damn sight hotter," he added. As belligerent as ever, Joe grimaced angrily. "And who are you?" he barked. "I'm boy number 462, replied Eamon. Before Joe could say anything, Eamon, using every ounce of his 14-stone athletic boxer's frame, he threw a solid right hook, driving his huge fist into the face of the cleric. The sickening thud and the sharp crack of Brother Joe's shattered jawbone could be heard outside in the cafe. Stunned and barely conscious, Joe stumbled backwards to the floor. Now with his boxer's instinct to finish off his injured opponent, Eamon went in for the kill. But catching a glimpse of Joe's broken and bloodied face, he felt pity. Instead, he stood over the cowering bully. "Did it never dawn on you that we might grow up to be strong men one day?" Eamon said, before leaving the stricken cleric on the floor of the toilets. As he walked back to his wife, who was paying the young waitress for their meal, Eamon told the waitress that Brother Joe might need some help in the bathroom. "I think he's taken a bit of a fall," he said, before leaving the cafe. A few years later, back in Sydney, Eamon learned of Brother Joe's death at a Dublin cancer hospital from a friend. But instead of celebrating the death of his sadistic childhood persecutor, he simply blessed himself and said, "May he rest in peace."